Rocket Mafia, Pathfinder, 20-hour days. It's probably the nerdiest podcast I've done. To be with somebody that's worked with an Elon Musk, worked with a Tom O'Leary, that's doing innovative things in the world, how they're so maniacally focused on like urgency and accountability, and that you're gonna enjoy seeing it. Welcome, Tim. We've been trying to get this together for a while. I know with your busy schedule and me going different ways, it's been tough to get you together, but let's start with learning a little bit more about who you are and kind of why you're here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. So my name's Tim Barry. Currently, I'm the head of manufacturing and quality at a commercial aircraft company called Jet Zero, headquartered right here in Long Beach as well. Prior to coming to Jet Zero, I was worked for 10 years at a little company called SpaceX up in Hawthorne in a few different roles. Worked on the Falcon 9 second stage team and Falcon Heavy as well. Got a chance to work on the Starship program and the Starlink program also. I worked in Dragon 2, both the crew and cargo variants as well. Finished out my time there working on the additive manufacturing or 3D printing team in what is the world's largest metal additive lab. Between then and Jet Zero, I went to a startup called Vast, working on commercial space stations for a while. And as my current coworkers like to remind me, I am now an airplane guy and not a rocket guy anymore. So that's the work side. On the personal side, I grew up here in the South Bay, originally from Torrance, so I haven't migrated very far. I live in Torrance now. When I was a kid, I really enjoyed learning about the planets and the solar system and rocketry. And while I planned to be an astronaut, I got as close as I could in building the rockets. So I've always had a passion for aerospace and just exploration and learning overall. So
that's cool. As I think about kids today, we grew up, watching Tom and Jerry, which had no, or at least I did. They had no words at all. And then now I'll come in and I'll see YouTube TV and somebody's learning how to launch a rocket and what force is and what aerodynamics are. And it's cool to see nerds become cool again.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely that pendulum is swung probably a little bit from who you worked with at SpaceX, and then just everything that's going on in the world right now. It's cool to see. But in that, for a while there, that pendulum was swinging towards work-life balance, which I still think is important and a good buzzword. But talk a little bit about what grit and work ethic meant to you as your journey has been, because you've been a part of so many amazing projects. That doesn't just happen because you're a legacy or you went to a certain school or whatever. It happens generally because you're making things happen. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really enjoy the title of the podcast, Grit, because I think that's what it takes ultimately. It's work-life balance is great, and you want to make sure that you're not burning people out and you're investing in your employees and they have longevity. But ultimately, things don't get done, in a fast-paced startup or somewhere where you're working on advanced technology unless you're really willing to put in the hours that are required. The high sense of urgency, some people have called it a maniacal sense of urgency that you need, and a high level of accountability as well. So, the tack that I take nowadays is more so focused on let's have an immense sense of urgency, a high degree of accountability, and maximize what we get done within the bounds of the reasonable schedule that we work. So I think over time you strike a good balance there. Early on in my career, I would live at work and sleep there and shower there and do anything that it took ultimately. That got a bit more difficult when I had a few kids of my own, for sure. But I think that work ethic and focus on, maximizing every second, every minute, every hour, most of the time you're not fighting for days, you're fighting for minutes and hours. And I think maintaining that mentality throughout your entire career, whether you're still putting in the 20-hour overnighters or you're working a stable 8 to 10 hours, just making sure that every hour that you spend has purpose, and that you never confuse efforts with results, right? Because you could have someone that is putting in a tremendous amount of effort, but if you're not getting the results, you're ultimately not an attorney that gets paid on billable hours or anything like that. You have to still have the results. So I think, with my own family life, I've had to certainly strike a balance there, but still that, high level of accountability and sense of urgency maintains. And I think that is absolutely required of anyone that's working in advanced technology or at a startup nowadays, especially as well.
You talked about purpose, and you think that purpose comes from within, that purpose comes from like a passion at a young age, or it comes from like leadership at the top? Or maybe it's a combination of all of that, but where do you think that purpose in some of the companies you've been in comes from?
I think it's both. It's a dedication to the mission. You're obviously, someone can be an excellent leader and be very motivational, but you don't love what you do, or you're not motivated, or you can't really see the end goal. There has to be some, short, mid, and long-term goals to keep you motivated. It can't just be, one day we're going to go to Mars, although that is very, very near and dear to my heart, obviously. But I think it's having a passion for what you do, having a lot of self-reflection and accountability in your contribution, and seeing the value of your contribution to the overall mission that you believe in, but also top-level leadership, right? It's a lot of people will tell you, you can have amazing employees and they can be very dedicated, but if you don't have the right leadership or the right culture, then people get burnt out, they leave, and the mission ultimately doesn't succeed. So I think it's important to have a balance, but I certainly think, one of the things I always say is, I can teach you anything, I just can't teach you a work ethic, right? So if you're really dedicated and you want to work hard, then basically any skills or knowledge that you need, those can come, but you have to have the work ethic, and it has to come from within you.
And where do you think that comes from? If you were an insurance agent today, do you think you'd have that same passion work ethic?
I don't know. You make insurance sound pretty cool, but I probably not. I think it comes from, your life experiences, the things you're exposed to when you're young, the things that interest you and intrigue you and give you joy, and you kind of wrap all that up and channel it into your vocation or the thing that you decide that you want to do. I personally feel very lucky because I've always been interested in, making things with my hands and building things. I was a Boy Scout, so that comes naturally to me. And I got to parlay that into this amazing career where not only do I get to manufacture things, it's not just widgets, it's like these amazing, intricate systems and technology that you get to see the result of. So I think it's part of nature and part of nurture. It's your nature being inquisitive, wanting to learn, having a high degree of self-reflection of the things that you like and the things that you don't like, but also some nurture comes into it where I had the great opportunity of working for a lot of amazing leaders and around a lot of really dedicated and very smart people. And that certainly, molded and shaped my mentality overall and my dedication to the work that I do. So
that startup mentality that you've been a part of, do you think, for example, now you're a plane guy and you work at a startup, and then you have plenty of friends that work at a Boeing that's clearly struggling. A lot of that comes with risk. Some of it may be the entrepreneurial risk, or just the risk that, at a startup you could run out of money and you could not have a job the next week.
Sure.
Do you think that mature companies can still achieve that same level of maniacal passion to get things done and sense of urgency?
I think so. I think what plagues a lot of established or legacy companies is, decades of layers of management and bureaucracy, and just kind of a mentality that says, this is the way it's always been done, so that's the way we're always going to do it, because it's comfortable. So I think what it really takes is a cultural shakeup and, a top-down revamp of the leadership approach to say, let's, not have the 50 scheduled check-in meetings that we're going to have every week because we've been having them for 30 years and that's the way they did it at X, Y, and Z company. And it's also understanding that, even in a big company, you see them falter all the time because they don't make enough progress, they don't hit their targets, they're not able to keep up that sense of urgency. So I think people need to feel, whether they work at a startup or at a more legacy company, that their contributions every day ultimately lead to the success of the organization. And as a leader, you really have to make it clear, everyone from the CEO down to the person that's done the same, wipe with a cloth 500 times today. need to understand why what they're doing is important, why they're there, and why a sense of urgency in accomplishing their goals ultimately contributes to the success of the company. And then beyond just, personal accountability or drive, I think really evaluating like how many layers of management you have between you and the ground level people, how many walls you've put up so that, these people can't collaborate or talk to each other, share ideas, learn from each other, share best practices, and looking at the way that you're doing your goal setting and check-in mechanisms and things like that, so that people always know whether they're on track or not. Because I feel like, my personal opinion, I haven't worked at any legacy companies really, but my personal opinion from the outside looking in is that a lot of times people feel like, oh, we have time, or oh, don't worry about it, or the money will always come, or it'll always be there. Well, in the news lately, we've seen that that's not necessarily the case. So I think reinforcing every day that what you do matters, your contribution matters, you can see the results of your work. This is why it's important to have a high degree of urgency. And then on the back end, removing those layers of management, the bureaucracy, the paperwork, the just because we've always done this processes. I think both those things really unchain people to be the best that they can be and maximally contribute towards the goals of the company.
So all that resonates really well. Now, I think about some of the stories of being on Marshall Island and having a failure, all of a sudden having everything you guys work for fail in that moment. How do you, what would that feel like, I guess, being a part of, because you've been, anytime you're in startup, you have more failures than you have, successes a lot of times, right? And then how do you go, yeah, we're all working towards this and everything matters and everything, and then what's that feeling like and what does that do to the team? And then how do you rally the team after that?
Yeah, maybe one point of clarification here. I didn't work on Kwajalein.
Gosh,
okay,
sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah,
I think about failure in terms of just the amount of times that all those projects failed.
Okay, got it.
And then,
yeah, absolutely. So I think, I've certainly been, had my fair share of failures, both at the company level and at the team level over the years. And I think, it's important to, when those things happen, to take a step back and account for all the things that you did right and all the things that you did wrong that led you to this point. There's going to be plenty of missed opportunities or things that you should have seen maybe in test that you didn't pick up on or didn't incorporate the right fixes for. But ultimately, the most important thing is that you are reflective, but not to the point of it becoming analysis paralysis. You can't be gun shy. You have to understand that, failure is a part of success. It's, at SpaceX, the mantra is very much learn, fail fast, learn, iterate, incorporate those things, do it while the stakes are low so that ultimately it leads to success in the future when the stakes are high. So I think, a team that's very self-reflective, but also, doesn't dwell, I think is incredibly important. When you're picking up the broken pieces of, something that a test that failed, it's certainly not a happy occasion, but you're really just thinking about everything that you did to contribute towards the success or the failure, how you could do your job better, the additional I's and that you need to dot and T's that you need to cross, and really just focusing on the work itself, not I failed and oh boohoo me and I guess we'll try again someday. It's no, let's learn from this. Let's incorporate everything that we can. Let's bring in diverse opinions so that we get a new outlook or new evaluation of all the things that happen here, so we can learn, and let's move forward and let's get to the next test, right? So I think there's an element of resiliency that's there that is just endemic to startups, especially because it's we don't have a choice. We have to just pick up and keep going because we all want this to be a success. So I think it's being self-reflective, but not to the point where you're paralyzed by the self-reflection, I think is important. And then also celebrating the, incremental wins that you have as well. You can't just say in 10 years, we're going to launch this satellite and that's when we all get the payoff. It's really celebrating the wins, but also reflecting on the losses along the way that I think set the right pace for people to be able to say, we failed, that sucks, but let's pick everything up and let's try again.
Yeah, I know from athletic standpoint, I tell my kids all the time, celebrate these wins. the little moments. Like, if you do a personal best, it doesn't matter what the race or the distance or whatever it is. You have to celebrate that, because we do fail a lot in life, like a lot, like on a daily basis we fail. And so when you have those little successes, I think so many people get focused on in this 10 years or when we achieve this goal, but there's so many little wins along the way that you have to, at least to stay somewhat inspired. And that's in finding the right balance of also acknowledging the failures and saying, like, what did we learn from it? I think too often failing is uncomfortable, and too often companies go, oh, well, that person failed, or we failed in this, and so let's not talk about it because it might hurt morale, instead of failing and going, like, that sucked, didn't it? Like, I don't want to feel like that again, or you don't want to feel like that again. What did we learn from this, and how do we make sure that doesn't happen again, and that the next one is a success? So it's an interesting balance of between the two.
Yeah, and I think something that you said really resonated with me, which is like, on the teams that I've led, I've always promoted that openness and transparency, where if somebody messes up, myself, anyone else, you raise your hand, you say, hey guys, I messed this up. Like, here's what went wrong. You may, it may be painful in the moment, or, there's always going to be an element of shame that you might feel. But ultimately, there's a few things there. Like, if everybody is accountable to themselves and their teammates, then you're ultimately going to have a better result and work better as a team overall anyways. You don't just end up with a bunch of fiefdoms where everyone's like, stay away from my stuff and please don't tell me that I failed. It's also good, at SpaceX and anywhere else where you work on really intricate systems. It's always encouraged to have, you check your work, I'll check your work, you check my work, and just be open to fixing things, because a new set of eyes or a new perspective may catch something that you didn't. Ultimately, someone may learn something from your failure that prevents them from making a mistake in the future as well. So I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's super important to, not have too much ego, to be able to come out and say, I messed this up, here's exactly how I did it. And I learned from it, and I'm not going to repeat this mistake again. It teaches not only you to be open and self-reflective, but also it may help your teammates to avoid the similar mistakes in the future. So I've appreciated that I've always worked places that had that culture of, like, I messed up, here's how I did it, and here's how we're going to fix it.
How did you find those teams? Because hard work doesn't show up on a resume, right? It's not there on, like, this is the amount of hours I work or commit to. Like, how do you find, and then how quickly do you flesh out those that just aren't willing to go that path? What's that process look like for you?
It starts all the way with, if you're speaking specifically about, like, how do you gauge a candidate?
Like running your team, yeah. You've run big teams. You're running a team that's about to expand significantly. How are you gauging that, and how are you making sure that you don't hire the wrong person?
Sure, yeah. I do have on my current team, I have a good benefit of plenty of folks that I've worked with in the past. We'll colloquially refer to ourselves as the rocket mafia, because a lot of us come from the space business. But beyond that, new employees that I have, it starts all the way with the initial screening call. When I talk to them, I'm not just asking, hey, just read me your resume verbatim, and you went to X, Y, and Z college, and you worked at this consulting company, so you're probably okay. No, I ask a lot of pointed cultural questions and team fit questions, and I just ask people to tell me about themselves, not their work life, but themselves. And I think you can learn a lot from that, just in someone's hobbies or the life experiences that they've had, or the way that they even talk about their job outside of just the nuts and bolts of exactly what they did. I think you can gauge that, and then having a diverse set of opinions when you give an interview, because there's things that I'll always think of, or things that I want to ask or evaluate someone on. And my coworkers, they have their own backgrounds, perspectives, opinions, and you get a really comprehensive view of someone. And then, once they get into the door, you never know someone 100% until you actually get to work with them and see them work. Then it's just from day one, what's their mentality? Are they curious? Do they want to learn? Do they have a high work ethic? Are they really driving every day to be better, to learn better? Are they being incredibly proactive? Some of the best employees I've ever had are extremely proactive. They, and I think that's the hallmark of a hard worker, and someone that's going to be successful is not not just, I got this feedback, I'm going to incorporate it, and now I'm going to do something different. It's really just seeking out feedback. It's, hey, I did that. No one asked me to do this, but I just knew that it had to be done, right? Versus the converse, which is like, oh, that's not my job, I'm not going to do it. One great leader that I worked for once told me that if you know about it, it's your problem. And that's the way that I've always tried to work, and what I've tried to instill in my teams, which is like, if you know that there's a problem, you should be solution-oriented. You should try to help fix it. You should be proactive. You should dive in to help out, and not just say, oh, maybe there's an Indiana Jones analogy here at the end when he goes, oh, top men are working on that, right?
Yeah.
Can't have that mentality. So I think, all the way through the interview process, it's really gauging them and their personality and the cultural team fit. Do they have the right mentality? And then once they get in the door, it's just really seeing how they act from day one. Are they talking to as many people as they can to learn? Are they diving in to help out with things that they know how to do? Are they picking up new skills that they didn't know how to do before? And are they really, trying to become better as a person while also making the company better? I think those things, having those types of people around together, they feed off of each other. Everyone learns from each other. Everyone gets better. And it just cultivates this high degree of accountability and ownership, and like people feel like it's a vocation, not just a job, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is just always talking to people about their mental state and how they're doing, and do they feel rewarded? Are they getting satisfaction? Another thing that I always like to say, sorry for all the Tim Barryisms here, but yeah.
On that one, I mean, not to talk too much on Elon, but like, everything I've read is he's not checking in like, hey, how's your mental state today, Tim? Like, he's like, no, we're going to the moon, and whatever the hell your mental state is something different. Like, so how do you take that and create your own path of that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, something that I heard before was, you take the good from every person that you've ever worked with or worked for. And there's certainly, good pieces of every person I've ever worked for. But I think, at a certain level of scale, you maybe lose the ability to go to every single person and say, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? Are you feeling rewarded? Just checking in. But what I've found, in the teams that I've managed is, at least with the frontline folks that work for you, you have to have some degree of just at least saying, are you feeling rewarded in this job? Are you learning at a rate that's acceptable to you? Are you deriving joy from this job? I think if you can have both things, where you have this insane dedication to the mission, and everybody moving in unison towards a common goal, but also have those periodic check-ins to make sure that people are deriving a lot of joy from it, I think ultimately it helps you to increase the longevity of the team into the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about like the grit of an entrepreneur, and specific within a teams and positions. And
Absolutely.
You talked about the idea of being proactive, and so maybe touch a little bit on how you view the aura of being an entrepreneur with being like because when I see you're like the entrepreneur of your own team. Like you're running that ship, and you have your own vision of how it is and how you're going to do that, and it ultimately goes into the entire company. But maybe touch on a little bit about your view in terms of how you run your part of the team.
Sure. Yeah. I 100% agree with you that, being entrepreneurial extends beyond just starting your own business or something, right? I think I keep going back to accountability and urgency. There's certainly a theme here, but I think like to be entrepreneurial, speaking on my own experience specifically, it's like you have a vision for what you think needs to get done, how the team should run, how you're going to achieve the aggressive goals that you have, taking those top level company goals and distilling them down into like tangible goals for your team. And then, working every day to navigate the path to hitting those goals, and ultimately making sure that you have the right systems in place, the right check-in mechanisms, the right people in the right positions. So really, I mean, building a business outside a standalone business is not very different at all from building a high-functioning team within a business, because you need to make sure you have all the right people, the right systems, the right tools, the right goals, and that you have the ability to instill a level of accountability and urgency into everybody that works with you and everybody that works for you as well. So I think it's, you just have to be an unstoppable force that, like I'll always tell people, if somebody owes you something, you don't just send an email and you wait like 2 weeks to hear from them, right? And if you ran your own business, you would not do that.
Yeah.
You would immediately pick up the phone, you'd be calling them, you'd go to their place of work, you'd go to their house if you could find it, maybe not that, but, you're never satisfied with just sitting back on your laurels and being like, I did something and I fired off an email and now I'm just going to sit back and wait. I think you have to be proactive. You have to understand, talk to people, always have your pulse on what's going on and check in and lend, not be afraid to dive in and lend help where it's needed as well, right? Because part of being an entrepreneur is no one's going to come along and solve your problems for you.
Yeah.
And so for me, on a given week, I might find myself like, wrenching on something or, even walking through the hallway and you see a little piece of trash on the ground, you pick it up and throw it away because you don't just assume someone else is going to do that for you. So I think all those things are important. Not only do they help to set a good example for your team, but also it just, speaks to the mentality of an entrepreneur, which is like, no one's going to solve my problems for me. I have to fix this right now, not tomorrow. And I need to make sure that I have a plan and that we're executing to that plan.
Are you the same way at home?
No, I think at home, my wife takes that over for me.
So you just take a deep breath and you just say like,
and she just tells me where I need to be. Yeah. She's got the calendar all written out. Yeah, I mean, I do bring a little bit of it to home. If something needs to get done, I'm certainly stay on top of that, and I do a lot of work around my house myself as well because I like the quality of my work. Yeah, at home a little less. I let my wife take a little more of the helm there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get enough of it at work.
That quality of work, when you're saying I like that quality, is that a pride thing? Is it just you want something done right, do it yourself? What do you think when you think that?
Yeah, I think it's there's plenty of people that do great work out there. I think for myself, it's like a lot of pride. I mean, if you do work on your own house and you get to see it every day, you bring people over and you say, "Look, I did that." Yeah. And if it didn't come out so hot, maybe you say somebody else did it. But I think it's a pride of work and just a sense of like, I don't just always have to pay someone to do something for me. I'm maybe I'm also kind of counteracting the sentiment that the men of the millennial generation are not as handy.
Yeah.
So I'm personally doing my best to combat that. But I think it does come back to just having a pride in the work that you do, and not being satisfied with subpar quality work, whether you do it yourself or anyone else.
Yeah. I think a part of that is how brain works. My son will walk by a door, he'll see it broken and he'll fix it. I'll walk by a door and I'll be like, we need somebody to fix that door. So
well, you did a good job with him.
He looks at it. The problem is he's like me, so he'll walk by, he'll fix that door, but he'll forget that he was on his way to take out the trash, and so the trash will be sitting in the hallway for 2 days.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
Because the door's fixed, but the trash is there. So his mom used to yell at him, but I would be like, that's TJ, that's why I would have done the same thing, except for not with the door, I would have saw something else. And so it's kind of funny how the mind works sometimes. How do you instill that accountability, urgency within your kids?
Interesting, yeah. I think it's a system of reward and punishment, right? Like I think we're not a big participation medal family, right? I mean, I think I've learned a lot. I played sports in high school as well, football, and I learned a lot from as much as I did from my losses and my failures as I did from the wins. But with my kids are relatively small. They're 1, 3, and 4, but just holding them accountable every day. I saw a great analogy, I'm sure you've seen it as well, which is start by making your bed, right?
Yeah.
Every day. And I love that so much. And that's what I do with my kids. Every day they make their own bed. Maybe not the 1-year-old, but every day they make their own bed. They clean up their own toys after they've, got done playing. And I think they clean off their own plates. I think it's just every day teaching them that no one's coming to save them. No one's going to do anything for them. They need to do it themselves. They have to take care of it. And it gives them a level of accountability. And then, when they do their chores and they do good in school, so on and so forth, then they get to have fun, and we go to Disneyland and we get to do a lot of fun things. And when they don't, then they don't. So they learn really early on. I've been really happy. I think my wife and I do a good job of instilling that, like, when you try hard and you're accountable and you take care of the things that you need to, then you get to have, enjoy the good parts of life.
Yeah.
So I think that instills it from early on, and I'm fairly certain I got a similar upbringing from my parents as well.
There's all these studies that are coming out now that's saying kids that have chores are more successful in life. Now
Absolutely, I agree.
Generational, for two reasons. One, they get a sense of self-worth. You think, oh, I'm going to do this for my child, I'm being nice, but you're not giving them an ability to get their own self-worth and their own self-confidence in what that is. And then two, just responsibility, that like somebody's not going to do something for them, that they can do it. And so it's interesting to watch these studies come out. And then the third, I think the other big one is delayed gratification. Is it just not everything's right now, especially in today's generation where everything seems to be like
right on the phone.
Yeah,
right
I can
now.
get Amazon delivered and
tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. Yeah, I had this story where I told my daughter, I'm like, go get an egg from next door. She was like, baking, and you would have thought I was crazy asking her to go get the egg from next door, and I was like, no, go get the egg from next door, for two reasons. One, you got to learn how to ask for things.
Yeah.
And two, by you asking somebody something, you're giving them the power to ask you for something. And I think that, especially in Southern California, where you have people that pull into their garage and don't even know their neighbors, all of a sudden, by you going and asking, now you're giving them permission when they need something to come to you. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you start to create community and start to create an environment. And that's a unique thing. I think even in the workplace too. I have found myself, as I get older and the team grows, is like, how do I ask for things? Maybe I know the answer, maybe I know how to do it, but like, how do I ask for things that involves people in that sense of community? It's interesting, but for kids, that's a big deal.
I really love what you said, which is, the sense of accomplishment, right? Which is like, and I see it every day, even in just making their beds. The kids run to me and they say, Daddy, I made my bed. Come look at it, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, you did such a great job. And it's just establishing that cadence of, you're accountable, you do the work, and you get rewarded for the work, right? Whether it's, an attaboy or, ice cream or Disneyland or something like that. I think it's incredibly important, and it parlays well into the workplace also, because there's always a fine line, between, you want to make sure that you're acknowledging people's successes and their failures, obviously, and you want to give attaboys and just make sure people know how deeply you appreciate their efforts. But I'm also, anyone that works with me would tell you I'm also not the let's pop a champagne bottle every incremental achievement, because It's like, all right, we did it. We won this battle, but we're in a long war, so let's keep our eyes on the prize, and we're not going to take our foot off the gas at all. So I think there's an important balance that you strike there.
Yeah, I think it's hard too, because I'll wake up and run in the morning. I'll be like, yeah, that person's doing really well, and I need to give them a big attaboy. And then by the time I get in the office, 500 other ideas have come into my head, and I'm like, God, I was so nice about that person. And then the end of the day comes and everybody's gone, right? I'm like, oh, I forgot to tell that person how good of a job they've been doing. And so it's one, thinking it, and then two, making yourself slow down and be like, all right, that's enough, but now you need to actually show that appreciation. And I think for some that your mind is moving so fast, it's hard to just slow down and be like, all right, I gotta let that person know. In my mind, I feel like I tell everybody good job all the time, and then
but maybe it didn't finally connect. Yeah.
Never even let them.
I'm big on. I don't know if this is a secret to success or something, but I'm definitely big on the notes and the to-do list. I have a OneNote doc to my desktop, and I'm always just writing things down. So when I think about stuff like that, because I'm just like you, my brain is always working. Sometimes at night it's hard to go to bed because I'm just plotting world domination in my mind. So I think it's important to note those things down and just make sure you take it all the way through, because I've certainly learned over my career that you can have a great opinion of someone, or you think that you're giving them enough reassurance, and then like 3 months later they say, oh, you haven't told me thank you lately, and you're like, duh, you're right. Like I've thought that you did so well. So I think it's good to acknowledge those incremental wins and give the attaboys and let people know that they're appreciated. But like I said, also making sure that then you pivot that into, all right, and now let's go on to the next success, right?
Yeah, I do it all the time. I mean, I have 2 girls on my team, Marie and Megan, that are like, every morning on my run, I'm like, oh, they killed it. But by the time, we're all so busy, we don't even see each other. And I know they thrive off of attaboys, and then I have to slow down and do that sometimes. And then you have plans for them that you want to be like, oh, you could teach this class on this for our team. And so those notes are good. It's hard to do that on a run. I need
of course, yeah,
somebody to dictate, hey, go back and...
Or you need like a Neuralink or something, so you think about it and it immediately goes into a notepad.
How far away are we from that?
I don't know. My brain's too full of like rocket and airplane stuff to even think about brain stuff, I guess. Yeah.
So the new project, Jet Zero, which I've been lucky enough to be a small part of with Jet Zero, now you have the idea of flying people commercially at a much more enhanced experience. You're taking on a duopoly of Boeing and Airbus, and you see kind of all their failures of being legacy companies. On one hand, you're fighting time, right? Because there's others that are out there trying to do it, and then the legacy companies trying to, maybe they figure it out on their own. And then the other end, you have that sense of urgency you talk about, that maniacal sense of urgency. But here, you're talking about flying 250 people, where if there's a mistake, there's that safety part of it.
Absolutely.
Too. Yeah. It's one thing to launch a satellite, and it's very expensive failure and mistake or whatever that may be, but generally speaking, 380 people aren't going to perish or that sort of thing. Like, do you think about that any differently, or is it like the same? Maniacal, we're going to get this done, we're going to get it in time, we're going to make sure that we do all these things, but the stakes are different from your last to this one.
Of course, yeah.
And everybody looks at this, and so how does that translate to today? How's your mind shift there? Like, oh, wait a minute, we're flying a bunch of people versus launching expensive metal into air.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I certainly got a dose of it working on the Crew Dragon program. I saw a lot of astronaut crews. You shake their hand and you say, we're going to do everything we can to get you back safely, and was very proud of those missions. But certainly, a complete new tier of that, of like, the people that astronauts have a different risk posture from, mom and dad and the kids and the dogs getting on an aircraft. So I think it's, like one great example is our, subscale program. We're iterating with a lot of different sizes of vehicles that we're building. And that's really the opportunity to have some high sense of urgency, rapid iteration, learn fast, break things, incorporate those learnings, like I said, while the stakes are low. So I think that's one outlet for it. But as it relates to, the overall commercial variant that we're building, I think it's like, having a maniacal sense of urgency doesn't equal being extremely like risk happy or taking a lot of risk or shortcuts or anything. It's like we have a well-established playbook in front of us, which is part 14 CFR Part 25. It's the general certification guidelines of a commercial transport aircraft. We have the playbook in front of us. We know everything that's required. So let's maniacally and with a sense of purpose work down this very rigorous checklist that we have to do, right? And there's probably a great analogy of the pilots going through the checklist every time, no matter what. So I think it's not so much looking for opportunities to cut corners or shorten things or anything like that. I think it's more so just working with purpose every second of every minute of every hour of every day to what is a very well-established playbook and, what I feel is a great product at Jet Zero. And just never being content with mediocrity or sitting back on your laurels or waiting for somebody to do something for you. It's really like, what can we do right now in this moment today that's going to help us to burn down to climb this mountain that's a well-known mountain, and we know how high it is, and we know we have to get to the top of it. So, what are we doing today? How many steps are we taking towards climbing that mountain today? So I think the difference is certainly it's the most rigorous requirements on the planet, right? But there's also just a similar sense of urgency with just like, we know the road ahead, we know what we have to do. Let's make sure that we're not doing something tomorrow that could have been done today, so on and so forth, if that makes sense.
Well, as you're going through this, because it's a big lift.
Absolutely.
It's a really big lift. Do you even think about things like failure, or just we're going to get this done and we're going to figure out how to like?
I wouldn't be a human if it never crept into my mind. But I'm, my friends and folks on my team will probably tell you, and my wife would probably tell you that I'm a relentless optimist. So I'm very positive, and that's probably born from plenty of nights at 3:00 in the morning, wrenching on something, and then I'm going on hour 20 or something like that, and just being positive. So I think it certainly is something that I think about, and the consequences of failure in any given endeavor that we may undertake. But I think that if you think about that too much, and you're not proactive, you're just kind of reactive and just thinking, oh, I don't want to make a failure here or there, then you're going to fall victim to the same level of analysis paralysis. So I think it's important to stay positive and optimistic, but also, stay paranoid about the things that you have to do, and channel what would otherwise be maybe anxiety into proactiveness and effort to make sure that you minimize the chance of any failure that you might have.
I love that. Being paranoid about the things you have to do. Especially like on a team. Sometimes I think, oh, I'm the only one that's paranoid about this, being the owner here or whatever. But I know my other team members are paranoid about that too. But then how do you get everybody to be on that mindset? And I think that's a big challenge, I think, for running companies. And as you go from 200 employees to 10,000 employees, how do you get the entire team to do that? It's going to be a fun challenge for you in terms of what that looks like.
Well, we have the benefit of being able to craft it from the ground up, so that's great. You can make sure that that's established when the team is small, and it's easy to kind of set the culture and the pace. I heard a great saying once, which is only the paranoid survive, and I've certainly found that to be true. So I think it's if there's a theme here, I'm trying to tie it all together, which is like accountability, urgency, paranoia, and I think the paranoia is definitely born out of accountability. Like, I feel accountable for the work that I do, the things that I'm responsible for, the things that my team is responsible for, and if never being content with mediocrity is super important. It's not just like I checked these 5 boxes and that's it. You always have to be thinking of like, what beyond this? What haven't I thought about? What could happen? And I think that's where also having a diversity of opinions on the team is important, because I can't tell you how many times I've sat through a design review or something like that at any company that I've worked for where, someone hadn't spoken up the entire time, and then that one time they come up with something that's like, wow, we didn't even think of that like that. You're right. That would be super impactful if that happened. So I think it's a blending of things, but ultimately it's making sure that everybody feels accountable for their work, what they're doing, and thinking about the things that could go wrong. And then also, like I said, the transparency of being like, hey, I think I did my work correctly, but can you please check it, because I'm paranoid and I want to make sure that this is right, and having people check your work. So it's a blending of things, but I think it all does come back to that level of accountability that you have in what you do.
Yeah, I think the checking of the work's another aha moment. I think that too many times stuff goes out the door without just somebody else just taking a look at it. And when you're in it, when you're just all about it, there's just things that you miss from the outside.
Especially if it's like a 50-page document or something that you've been staring at for 3 weeks.
Yeah, all of a sudden it goes out and you miss something stupid, and you're just like, that was an easy one that somebody else looks at. And then that little mistake, all of a sudden, you lose trust in the larger. So the document could be dead on, but like some stupid spelling error, all of a sudden you're like,
what else did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And it's funny because it seems like, you get so tunnel vision on things that you work on, and then you send it out, and then when you're just checking it again after you've immediately sent it, you lock in right on the error that was there.
Oh my God, why did I do that?
So I don't know, maybe a good strategy is just to email it to yourself and then check it, read it when it comes in.
Yeah,
you know,
right?
but yeah, sorry, you were saying about checking work. Yeah.
I think that was a good aha moment. It's unique.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, and I think again, it speaks to, you know, not having that ego. I always like to say, you know, I have no shame when it comes to, and no pride of authorship. So I think that is another sign of a high functioning team, is when people aren't afraid to ask for help or ask for someone to double check them, because we all get so wrapped up in the things that we're doing that sometimes, you know, having a diverse perspective or another set of eyes on something could tell you that you might have missed something or done it wrong. And then you can't be like, oh, don't tell me that. You have to be like, thank you for the feedback, you know?
Jet Zero 2030 is a big date for you guys, right? That's when you're trying to go the first time on commercial-wise, or?
That's our currently planned entry into service date for the commercial variant, yeah. So we're planning 3 variants, one of which is a commercial aircraft, another is a freighter variant, so, you know, the UPSs and FedExes of the world, DHL, and then the third variant is a military variant that we're planning in partnership with Northrop Grumman.
So from 2024 to 2030, there's a lot of steps along the way to
absolutely
accelerate and not have failures on.
You know, everybody that we bring through our facility and they get to see all the great things that we have there. The number one thing that we get is, can you do this faster, or can we have this sooner? I always like to say that that we've ruined your flight home when you come for a visit, because you see what's possible and the potential coming out there. But yeah, you know, 6 years in airplane years is a blip.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've probably taken 4 or 5 tours, and it's every time I'm impressed with what you guys are doing. So
it gets cooler and cooler all the time. Yeah.
We finish with every episode. You get to ask me a question. What question do you have for me?
Why did you start a business instead of working at one?
Good question. Probably. So I worked at Merrill Lynch first out of college, and that was cool. I was a number. I didn't even know what I could accomplish. I was treated a little bit like go do this or go do that. I don't think anybody looked at what talent I possessed or what work ethic I possessed. I think it was more of what could they get out of me. And then, you know, probably the toughest thing I did was go work for a family business. I came in to work. My dad had a life insurance company, and that was just brutal because, one, there's that like chip on the shoulder of the nepotism thing. 2, my brother worked at the time there too, and that was we just had different ways. You know, love my brother. He wants to mountain bike all day. He doesn't want to be in the office. And
charmed life.
Yeah, I was like, I thought I could only mountain bike, you know, so many times. And so we just had different things. And so, and then working with, like, my dad is, you know, I bought the business in 2007. So you get told a lot what you did wrong. And that's hard, you know, when you look at your mentor and he's telling you what you did wrong. Probably more recently, you know, you start to hear the third-party comments that like, oh, you did something right.
Oh, there you go. So, he'll never tell you it himself.
Yeah. But running a business is hard because you're just trying to figure out where the right balance is, you know, where balance of new business or you know, what part is ops, what part is people, what part is all those things, and then how do you do it? But the paranoia of doing it right is something that I really like, and I think that it's lost today with a lot of capital being thrown in different spots. It's easy for people to just work and not be a part of that. What's cool to see with Elon's companies that I've read about, and now with Jet Zero and what you and Tom and the guys are doing, is that sense of pride. I think that if more companies had pride today, there'd be more people that were excited to work for them. But I think so many of that legacy companies, I mean, you look at, like pharmaceutical companies and well documented, like, the Sackler family with OxyContin, and let's drain it until we can't do it anymore. Then let's create a drug to get them off it. Like, there's no sense of purpose of like doing good. That's just money.
Yeah, you don't want to go home and brag about what you've done all day.
Yeah, I don't think, and not the insurance's business is sexy, but some of the things we do is so cool. And so I've truly enjoyed the journey of running a company. And people are paying crazy multiples in our business, and they always say, like, are you ready to sell? And I'm like, no, I love it. Like, I genuinely love it. I love the people. Even during the pandemic, I came in every day. The work from home thing, I get it why people like it, but
it's not for me.
It's not for me. I have a nice office at the house, and I'm in here every day. I love the energy of being around people. I love the collaboration. If I have a question, it'd be easy to Slack, but instead I'd rather go walk over and look somebody in the eye and be like, let's figure this out together. So I think that would be my long answer there.
I always say too, for myself personally, it's hard to do manufacturing remote.
Yeah,
maybe
right.
I'll be an iPad on like a humanoid robot someday, but can't do that now. I do have one more question for you. Maybe it won't make the cut, but tell me about a time that you failed as a leader and what you learned from it.
Time I failed as a leader. I allowed mediocrity to sneak into the organization out of fear. We were having a growth spurt, and we've had like growth spurts and growth spurts. In one, I started to bring in really good people, but I was afraid we needed people so bad that I was afraid to lose people, and I would put up with things that were unacceptable. And so as I accepted mediocrity and I talked about my goals, my highest performers kind of looked around and went like, you talk like you want these goals, but you don't
act like it. Yeah.
You don't act like it 100% of the time. You don't take extreme ownership. And if you're not taking that extreme ownership there, it wasn't so much, I looked at a non-performer and I'd be like, well, they're not losing us money. But what they were doing was they were creating a sense of what I call, I teach some HR at Long Beach State, and I call it the sense of the fuck it. It's like, fuck it, if he's not going to hold him accountable, why is he going to hold me accountable? Like, fuck it, if that person get away with it, I can get away with it. And so I think my biggest failure in my career, and I lost some really good people during that time, they're still close to me today, is like, I had a chance to grow with those people in a moment that probably would make us double who we are today, and I wasn't willing to fire. I wasn't willing to get rid of people and take chances on new people. Jack Welch has that fire the bottom 5% of your population every year, and I think it's really good if you look at everyone in your team and you go, who's the bottom 5%? Because that person's not only holding you down, but there's somebody that's eager outside of here that wants to come in and maybe be the top 5%. So in holding that bottom 5% around, you're just taking up space.
Yeah,
so
it instills the fact that mediocrity is good enough,
Yeah.
Letting
mediocrity sneak into a company is a poison, because it's so easy to just have a lifestyle and run a company, but if there's no sense of purpose, there's no sense of like paranoia, and that's cool. That brings energy.
Yeah, I love that you talked about extreme ownership as well. In a very roundabout way, I also alluded to that, and it's something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is just, you're accountable. If you know about it, it's your problem, and always make sure that you're getting results and not just putting in efforts. So
yeah, that, if you know about it, it's your problem, is something that we could learn from as an organization. There's times where people know there's problems and then they still go home. And
it's not my job.
Where'd you go? There's been a few times where, primarily with younger, but still, I'm like, where did you go? This was your project. They look around, they may see everybody else is gone, so I should go too because everybody else is gone. But I'm like, no, I'm sitting here waiting on this to get done. So you're not going anywhere. We owe our client this, and I think that I'm far better at that now. I'm far better of like being that extreme ownership, and so I love what you said there.
Well, don't discount the millennials. There's plenty of us out here that love extreme ownership.
Yeah, no, I see
we get a bad rap in the media.
No, I see it, and I'm super proud of my kids, and my daughter she's intense, maybe the most intense. So she's a good representation of like, there's ideas and work ethics and integrity that's coming out of the millennials that I think is propelling our country to the next level for sure in our world.
Well, I'll keep doing my part.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.